Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining today. I'm really excited to be talking with all of you about something that has become just a huge passion for us, working on tools to help improve the ways that users, that content editors interact with or create content for and actually get content into Drupal and ultimately their websites. So thanks again for being here. I'm going to stop my video actually and share my screen. Great, and hopefully everybody can see this okay. As Joe said, if you have any trouble, just let us know in the chat. Again, today we're going to be talking about Mercury Editor, which offers effortless drag and drop publishing for Drupal. Specifically, what we'll cover today is first just Mercury Editor, exactly what it is and how it works. We'll cover just quickly the key features of this editor of Mercury. I want to talk a little bit about the open source ecosystem around Mercury, kind of the status of Mercury as an open source project and as a suite of customizations that really bring together a number of open source projects. Something that we hear from time to time, or questions that we hear from time to time, are around how Mercury or Layout Paragraphs or Layout Builder differ from some of the other systems out there or some of the other tools out there. So I just want to run through a few tools that are available in Drupal and do a quick comparison, and hopefully shed some light on where we think Mercury sits against some of the other solutions that are out there. We will do a demo. If you've been to any of these in the past, it'll be a real similar demo. We'll build a case study on the Aten.io website using Mercury Editor so you all can get a sense for how this works. At some point in that demo, I'm going to switch over and show a little bit of code that drives some of the style options. So if you're curious at all how styles work with Mercury, you can see some of that. And then finally, should have plenty of time for questions. So let's dive in. So first, what exactly is Mercury Editor? Mercury Editor is Layout Paragraphs, a Drupal module. Mercury is Layout Paragraphs plus a custom component library. So a suite of components tailored to the needs of the individual implementation website. Mercury Editor is style options, so the ability to create styles both for layouts and individual components. We'll get into that here in a few minutes. Mercury Editor offers an enhanced UI on top of Layout Paragraphs, so it's just further streamlined so that content editors can continue to focus really primarily on just content. And then finally, Mercury Editor provides inline text editing similar to Quick Edit and Core. I would say in this context, even more streamlined, a really easy to use kind of point and click text editing solution in the context of Mercury specifically as it works with Layout Paragraphs. So this is what Mercury entails, is really these pieces. Mercury Editor is built on a collection of open source modules. Mercury Editor is not today available at Drupal.org. Mercury requires enough customization and is prescriptive enough in the way it creates styles and makes assumptions about a particular website that we're still working through the best way to release Mercury itself as a module on Drupal.org. That will happen, but that's something we're still working through. In the meantime, Mercury is a collection of customizations on top of existing systems within Drupal. It includes the Layout API, which is in Drupal core. It's the same series of APIs used by Layout Builder in core. It is, again, Layout Paragraphs with a series of customizations. So it uses Layout Paragraphs, and it does not use a separate version or anything like that. It's literally just adding customizations on top of Layout Paragraphs. We often use the Stories module in our Mercury Editor implementation. Stories provides a library of paragraph types or component types for building dynamic, rich content in Drupal. Finally, Mercury Editor, it also includes style options or leverages style options for styles management. And again, we'll see a little bit of how that looks, exactly what that means here in a minute. And really, finally, Mercury Editor provides inline editing. So again, something akin to Quick Edit that works with both CK Editor 4 and CK Editor 5 in Drupal core as of Drupal 9.3, I think, for CK Editor 5. Okay, so what's next for Mercury? We do not have a publicly published roadmap for Mercury. There are a series of things that we are working on that I just want to kind of let folks know about. One, we're going to continue to publish components as Drupal.org modules. And when I say components, I mean various aspects of the system. One specific example is this inline editing tool. This will soon be a module on Drupal.org, built on top of layout paragraphs. I'll show you what that means exactly here in a few minutes. We're working on a better setup for managing restrictions and restraints in Mercury. What that means is we want to make it really easy for folks to say, this component can go in this region, but not in that region. So maybe a large image can go inside the header region, or hero image can go in the header region. A hero image cannot go in the left-hand column. And right now, the UI and the controls for managing that really aren't there yet in the system. We're focusing also on creating content templates for more complex components. So you could imagine having a library of different case studies, for example, which I'll show in a few minutes, or different landing page types, where you can choose a landing page to serve as your starting point and then customize from there, or just small pieces within a landing page. So maybe a masthead component, again, that comes out of a case study that I'll show in a few minutes, maybe an image gallery, etc. We're thinking through and focusing on how to create, again, a template approach for creating content, making that really simple. And I should say really quickly, that's separate from integration with paragraph libraries, which already exists in both layout paragraphs and Mercury Editor. And then finally, we're working on creating a UI for content moderation when using the front-end builder. I'm going to show the front-end builder here in just a couple minutes and what that looks like and how it provides kind of a seamless, really close to what you see is what you get editing experience. This works seamlessly with content moderation today, but it does not provide a UI for managing moderation states, anything beyond what already exists in Drupal. So we're working on a way to bring a UI directly to the front end builder. And I'll kind of talk about what that means in a minute too. Oh, and then finally, we will release Mercury Editor as a Drupal module. Again, some of the challenges that we're working through with that is just identifying the best way to, for example, create really prescriptive styles that work regardless of what front end or back end theme a particular site has enabled. And it ends up creating the need for some really prescriptive CSS and a lot of customizations depending on the environment. And those are the kinds of issues that we're kind of working through as we determine the best way to release this as a module on Drupal.org. Okay, as I said, I want to compare just a few editing tools that are already out there in Drupal, kind of talk about where I think Mercury sits. So this is by no means comprehensive. I'm just going to talk through 5 different tools. CK Editor, which of course is the de facto text editor or WYSIWYG editor for Drupal. We'll talk about Drupal Gutenberg, which is a port of the de facto WordPress editing solution. I'll talk about Layout Builder, Layout Paragraphs, and finally Mercury Editor. I'll move fairly quickly through this piece. Again, just want to give enough information on each of these so that it's kind of clear where we see some of the advantages of Mercury are for a specific group of users. Let's start with CK Editor. Anyone who's worked with Drupal, virtually anyone who's worked with Drupal has interacted with CK Editor. CK Editor is a powerful WYSIWYG text editor. It's been around for a very long time. It's extensible with tons of plugins. CK Editor uses this concept of data upcasting and downcasting, which transforms data, in the case of upcasting, for rendering to the editor, and then transforms, in turn, transforms data for saving or for storing by downcasting. And this means that it supports really interesting and fairly complex integrations with things like media, embedding entities, images, other components within Drupal. At the end of the day, CK Editor is storing content as text or markup in the database. So as you manipulate content on the screen, as you move things around, et cetera, you're really just moving around markup. One challenge that can pop up with CK Editor is it can get a little glitchy moving things around, especially with more complex layouts, leaving editors with the sense of, that's good enough. They hit save, and sometimes that ends up with that text or markup in the database being a little broken or being a little messier than what we would like, and can make it more challenging to, if you're storing really complex data, can make it more challenging to handle migrations in the future, migrations in or out of the system. In our view, CK Editor is primarily used by content editors. So it's used by the people actually creating content, adding content into the system. Similarly, Drupal Gutenberg is also an editor right from the Drupal.org project page. Gutenberg is an editor like CK Editor, where CK Editor provides a series of plugins for, and this concept of like downcasting and upcasting for managing those transformations and representing that data to users. Gutenberg uses the concept of reusable blocks and also includes integration with blocks from Drupal core. It's extensible, tons of plugins available. Again, with a system for building your own plugins. Gutenberg's focus on blocks, this whole idea of choosing a block, whether that's a paragraph, a heading, gallery, etc., makes it, in addition to that, layouts are blocks or columns are blocks. It makes Gutenberg ideal for creating more complex content, even with complex layouts. But again, Gutenberg stores content ultimately as text or markup in the database. And if you're pulling in any content from elsewhere in your system, you end up with references to those entities or those structures from within markup, within text in the database, which again would require a transformation step, both for rendering, but also for migrating in or out of the system. Once again, Gutenberg, we think of this primarily as a tool for content editors, for people who are actually creating content for the site. Transition a little bit and just talk about Layout Builder quickly. Layout Builder is a drag and drop page building tool for creating layouts, specifically with Drupal blocks. Layout Builder manages, it doesn't just do this, but it manages the Drupal entity display modes. So you can basically take over the display for any entity and define layouts with site-wide templates. So you can say for all nodes of a particular type, this is what I want my layout to look like, with the title field at the top, then the body, maybe the image field off to the right, etc. It can be used to build one-off pages with blocks. It can also be used to create specific customization. So if you've said, this is the way I want all of my, for example, case studies to look and arrange fields in a particular way, you can kind of break that mold and customize the layout for specific instances, specific nodes as well. Layout Builder is extremely powerful. You can literally place any block, any Drupal block from your website using Layout Builder. With that power comes a lot of complexity. Layout Builder, as it comes, it can be rather complex. Layout Builder uses a much more structured approach to storing its content, to storing layouts, than say CK Editor or Gutenberg. And in our view, the ideal use case for Layout Builder, the ideal user for Layout Builder or persona is site builders and developers. Layout Builder is becoming the de facto way to create layouts across a site, to manage, where we used to use like the block layout page in Drupal, or the block layout admin page in Drupal, or Panelizer. Today, kind of the de facto approach for constructing layouts is usually Layout Builder. And I should say that Layout Builder is something that we do use on most of our deployments, most of our work, often in conjunction with layout paragraphs, which we'll get to here in a second, or right now, actually. Okay, so layout paragraphs. Layout paragraphs is a drag and drop content editing tool. So not just page building. Layout paragraphs is a content editing tool for creating content using Drupal paragraphs. It is both a page builder and a content editor. It uses familiar Drupal systems, entities, field widgets, field formatters, etc. So if you're used to setting up reference fields and choosing the formatter or widget for those fields, this will feel very natural. It's extremely easy to use. Layout Paragraphs was designed from the ground up specifically to be easy to use for content editors. The folks who we had in mind while building this module, while creating this module, are marketers, editorial staff, folks who really care about content and want simple tools for managing content or for adding content into a site. Which brings us finally to Mercury Editor. So Mercury Editor, again, Mercury is Layout Paragraphs plus a series of customizations. It provides drag and drop content editing specifically from Layout Paragraphs. The user interface has been significantly enhanced just to help create an environment where content editors are able to really continue to focus on content and not the admin experience. It provides styles management with style options, which we'll look at here in a minute. Provides inline text editing for an even more streamlined experience and for really quickly adding and editing text components. Provides a custom component library. And again, this is one of those customized elements of Mercury where each implementation we're working with clients to identify what's the appropriate collection of paragraph types or component types for a particular implementation. Mercury is extremely easy to use and intuitive. It stores content in a very structured way, makes it simple and very powerful to migrate content both in and out of the system. And then finally, once again, Mercury Editor is primarily used for content creators, for content editors. And the personas we really had in mind with building this tool are marketers, editorial staff, the folks who are working in content day in, day out, and want to be able to get content into their site easily to create, unique, varying types of content or pages without constantly having to re-engage with developers or an outside agency. So that's a quick rundown of some of the tools that are available and how we think Mercury, what we think the kind of positioning is or where Mercury sits in that landscape. I'm going to transition here and do a demo. So we'll click over to our agency website, atendesigngroup.com. This is a Drupal 9 site. I'm logged in as an administrative user. We're going to do a live demo on a live website and not publish anything. So let's go to the content page, to the admin content page, add content. Again, as I've said before, case studies are an ideal example of the kinds of content that we wanted to support creating with this tool, with Mercury Editor. So we'll choose case study. We're using the same theme for node add and edit forms as we do for the front end, which is why this looks somewhat similar to what we were just looking at. Other than that, this is just a typical Drupal content entry form. I'm going to give this a title because it's a required field. Skip everything else because it's not required. As I mentioned, Mercury works seamlessly with content moderation. So this is the moderation field here, the moderation status. I'm going to leave this as idea in our workflow, which leaves that unpublished. Hit save. Once this is saved, we have not created any content yet. Content is just the name of the field that the paragraphs or components are attached to. And that's why this message is telling me that I haven't created any content yet. Were that field name something different, that would appear here. And this is all customizable in templates in the system. So let's start creating content. The way this is set up for our site, we have to first add a section. You click add section, choose the number of columns you want for your section. This layout with tabs and being able to manage styles and layouts separately is something that's provided specifically by Mercury, one of those interface enhancements on top of layout paragraphs. We'll choose a one column layout. That's been immediately dropped into the interface here. add a component into our layout. I'll choose masthead. Masthead has a number of fields. I'll just quickly scroll through these and give these values. This integrates with the media library, so I can narrow this down based on the client name here or on keywords. We'll choose these two images. I'm gonna just rearrange the order those images will appear in. I'll leave the rest of these fields just as they are and hit save. And we can see that masthead component is dropped immediately into the screen. Now, as I was saying earlier, one thing that we're working on, and is not a part of this demo today, is being able to create templates for more complex pieces of content like what we're looking at. So you might choose from a library of existing mastheads, sort of as a starting point as you're building a case study or any other type of content. Now, this looks pretty good. Let's take a look at the style options really quick. So we have the style tab. These styles are applied to the layout generally. This drop down at the top would let us choose any regions that are within the layout. I'll leave that as just to, broadly applying to the layout. I'm going to change the color scheme to light on dark. Give this a background color. Not mean to click upload an image and hit save. And we can see those changes again immediately take effect right in front of us. Great, so let's add another section. We'll go 3-column. I'm just going to go off screen here and grab some text, paste in. So that 3-column layout has been dropped into the interface here. We'll add some text. This is that streamlined inline text editing experience that I was talking about. When you add a new text paragraph, it immediately opens the WYSIWYG right here in the context of the page that you're working on. If we want to edit text, again, you can just click on it and you're immediately editing that text with all of the formatting options from the WYSIWYG. And that WYSIWYG, that CK Editor instance is just coming from the editors that you've configured on your website. So if you're using CK Editor 4 or 5, it'll pick up the way, it'll pick up the configuration for that editor specifically, and that's what it will use as far as the options across the top of this toolbar. Drop some text in. This is looking pretty good. Let's again go in here and look at what changes or what our options are. I'm going to narrow this down to the primary region. So this is now targeting primary, just means left in this case. Add some padding to the left region or the primary region. All of those region names, just as a quick aside, are customizable. Give this a background color, hit save. You can see where that background color and padding style has been applied to this paragraph. This is looking pretty good, but I'd rather have this in 2 columns. This is one thing I think that's a little different than Layout Builder. With layout paragraphs, you can switch between the number of columns, or you can switch between the layout type of a section. I'm going to change this from, once I've chosen 2-column, it's now asking me what do I want to do with the items that are in the 3rd column that would be essentially lost. So I can say, well, let's put the 3rd column items into the 2nd or the secondary column. Hit save, and so that paragraph that was out on the furthest is just moved into the 2nd column. Great, and that's looking a lot better. At any point, we can save. And if we like, we can hit close, and it just immediately shows us, without even refreshing the page, just via Ajax, we're back to the View tab. And so you can see how closely that resembles the front end of the site. Or how closely this is the front end of the site, how closely this resembles the editing interface for the site. I'm going to add just a few more sections to continue to kind of get a sense for how this works. Add another 1 column, grab some text to drop in here. Add some text, paste in my text block. I'll just do a little bit of live formatting here. So break this into paragraphs, but then I'd really like that to be an unordered list with an H2 heading. That's looking pretty good. Let's give this a background color though. So we'll go back into styles. In a minute, I'll show how these styles are actually managed, which gets into a little bit more of the developer persona when we talk about how styles are managed. If I click edit on this text paragraph, I can choose horizontal list from the list styles style. And that gives it that nice horizontal list look. One really cool feature in layout paragraphs and Mercury is this clone feature. So if I want to do something similar, if I want to have another section, in this case, I'll talk about solutions. I can just quickly clone my first section, go back in and remove the background color, grab some text specifically for this section. Again, do some live formatting here. When I change this to a formatted list, it immediately gives it that style because it's still using, since I duplicated the other one, it's still using that horizontal style from the style options. And that's looking pretty good. There are tools for moving blocks up and down. So you can hit up and down to move things around. You can see those kind of animating into place. You can, of course, drag any of these components anywhere. Mercury includes some enhancements in the way dragging works. So it provides a much simpler indication of where something's going to be dropped with this blue bar. So things jump around hardly at all, just making sure that things don't glitch. Sometimes it can be really complicated when dragging and dropping large blocks, especially on a large screen. I'm gonna add just a couple more components here. We'll add a 3-column. Go ahead and create the styles right from the beginning, light on dark. Choose this blue background. Again, copy in some text. And it's interesting, or it's interesting to me anyways. I was talking about, some of the tools that are available, and I talked about CK Editor as one of them. And of course, we're literally using CK Editor as a part of layout paragraphs, and really just in that it is the way content is entered into these various paragraph types. So, again, we think of CK Editor really as a text editing tool. That's kind of what you're seeing here today as well. Go back into the slideshow here, narrow this down to bolder images. Just grab a few of these, hit place. Those have been attached here. We could rearrange the order, of course. Hit save, and those are immediately dropped into the page, in addition to the library required for actually rendering this as a slideshow. So you can immediately kind of play with this and get a sense for what you're building, get a very clear sense for what you're building. I'll add one more here, and then I'll go over to show how the style options management works. So again, we'll do a 2-column, another light on dark, background color, save, add some text into the left column. And add an image over on the right. Grab this really large image. And this image is going to be a little tall. So it's going to kind of break the design a little bit, but we've created a custom style that will help with that. So if I go back into the image, hit styles, this media full style just makes this image take up the space that it's in rather than bursting out of that space. I'll go back into the section and add a background image really quick. Save, and you can see how that just kind of subtle background of mountains has been applied in the background here. One other thing worth noting is how this works for responsive design. So one thing that we've built in, and this is completely customizable to each implementation, but when editing, probably best if I showed you on a multi-column layout. When editing a multi-column layout, one of the options we have is column stacking. And this just says whether we want columns to stack from left to right as this collapses to smaller sizes, or right to left. So if it's left to right, save, close. Let's make this smaller. As we make the screen smaller, the left column stacks over top of the right column. Go back in and edit that again. Go back to styles, change that to right to left. Hopefully I made that style change on the right component there. And as we get smaller, yeah, now we can see that that right-hand column is stacking first. So again, just an option. Those options are completely customizable, again, to the needs of each individual site, but that's an option that exists on our site to control how this renders on mobile and other screen sizes. One other thing worth noting, accessibility is definitely something that we take really seriously at Aten and something that we have kept in mind while developing layout paragraphs in Mercury. There are tab controls or keyboard controls for all of the Mercury editing interface, including the ability to move items around. So when you tab to the drag handle, we get this message that says drag or click and use arrow keys to move, press enter, and we can now move this block around with our arrow keys, which is a little complicated when it's such a big item, a little hard to follow what's going on, but hopefully a good indication of how that works. So if we again select this, we can move this content around. Oh, there it went. So move this content around with the arrow keys. Sometimes it's a little easier to move things around with arrow keys than with the mouse anyways, as these layouts can become quite large and complex. Let's take one more look at the style options. Again, there's a number of styles available to this layout. Padding styles, color scheme, background, etc. And then in addition, just a custom style with some arbitrary classes that have human readable labels for them. Those styles, again, can be created in a way that targets the layout or the sections within the layout. So we go to this 2-column layout and we can edit styles independently for the layout itself or for each of the regions inside the layout to affect that. And then similarly, the components themselves have styles. So we can click into a text component, go to its style tab, and again, we see an even different set of styles that are available for each of the components. That's all provided by the style options module, which is available on Drupal.org. There's only a dev release at this point, or I think we have an alpha release for that. So it's a pretty, again, a fairly new module. As far as I know, primarily being used by us for Mercury, although it certainly can be used for others as well. The way style options works, it allows themers or developers to define options in a centralized location, in a single location. So I'm just jumping into some code here really quickly. I really keep this quick. This is our custom theme for our website in the code base here. To get style options to work, all you really need to do is create a style options YAML file, name it your theme or module, .style_options.yml. Within that, there's a format that it's expecting for the YAML configuration. First, you define the options. So again, we've defined options, the first called padding with a human readable name of padding, and then the series of options themselves. Default, padded, flush bottom are the 3 padding options that we've created. This is using the image just tells style options to render this radio button as an image. So that's what maps to. If I go back to this demo, click on edit, and we're looking at styles, those padding options are what map to this. And the images that we're pointing at for image under options, again, are what's being rendered here as the image for these what are essentially just radio buttons styled as images. So here we define the options. We have padding options, list styles, again to toggle back. List styles, which you can't see here because we're not in a component, but list styles. So padding, list styles, color scheme, again maps to these color scheme options. Each option just says what plugin to use. Right now, I think there's only 3 plugins available. There's CSS class, background image, and background color. There's a lot that can be accomplished with those 3. So this ultimately ends up assigning a class that's defined in the group of options to whatever it's attached to. So first you define what all the options are, again, under this options item. And then separately, you define what the contexts are. So where do you want this option to show up? You can assign options to show up for paragraphs. So in this case, we said, by default, all paragraphs should have the padding, list styles, color scheme, background color, and background image options. But in addition, we want image paragraphs to also have the media type option. And again, that was defined, those options are mapped to what was defined up here in the options section. Hopefully all that's clear. Happy to answer more questions about how that works. The 2 contexts that are supported by style options right now are paragraphs and layouts. This style options was designed to work with Layout Builder, and I'm honestly not sure offhand if we're using this for Layout Builder anywhere or not, but this is built using a custom layout plugin, which is very much a part of the Layout API system that's core in Drupal. So designed to work with Layout Builder as well as with layout paragraphs or anything that's using the Layout API. So that's a quick look at style options. Go back to our piece of content here. And hopefully that gives everyone an idea of how Mercury Editor works and how, again, as a tool for creating content and building out pages, makes it really easy for marketing and editorial staff to work with content. One last just quick aside as I wrap up this piece of the presentation here. I talked earlier about moderation tools. We can all see the save and cancel buttons across the bottom. Something that we're actively working on right now is another module built on top of layout paragraphs in Mercury that would provide content moderation tools. So you could choose to create right here. We would have at the bottom of my screen, you would have an option for creating a new draft, saying what moderation state you wanted something to go into and easily toggling whether you were creating a new draft or editing the same draft. Right now, this is always just saving the draft, whatever the draft is that we're looking at. So again, it works with content moderation, but does not add any extra management for moderation or UI or anything like that. So I'm going to hit save one last time and then close the editor. Again, we can just see that that's now rendered the view with Ajax. Just hit the view tab to get rid of those messages across the top. And again, looks really similar to the editing interface.